Hi, good evening, and thank you so much for joining. This is our first conversation on a different topic other than just fertility, but rather on motherhood and what is the desire, the timing, the social expectations. And is it something to consider? Is it something to not consider? And what are some of the aspects? So I'll start off with a little bit of an introduction about myself, and maybe some of you can resonate with that journey. Of course, every person, every parent and every mother's journey is different, and every individual's journey is different. But mine started off, as you can hear from my accent, started off in the US where I was born and raised, and I moved here in 2009. Started off working in HCG, started off kind of working from an 8:45 in the morning to 8:45 at night, because work is still to this day a big part of who I am and what I enjoy. And honestly, love to work with people, love to work in healthcare. But as that journey progressed, and as I found my partner, and as we decided to step into parenthood, it was a very different journey. And the journey started because I was a carrier of DMD. So I only realized in my late 20s that I had to actually go for IVF. And when going through that, I thought, okay, I'll be able to have a child soon. But it became actually a 5-year journey. And in between that, we also did our application for adoption. So the story ends with the good news that I have 2 children who are 3.5, pretty much twins, 73 days apart. But the journey was a lot on how do I balance what I want to do professionally, what I want to do as an individual, what I want to do as motherhood. And for me, it was very clear that I always wanted to be a mother, but it was a big challenge of how to get there. And of course, health and other things came in the way. But as I went through this journey, I also had the opportunity to talk to many different parents from different walks of life, from different age groups, of what they experienced 20, 30 years ago, or what they experienced versus what their children or their grandchildren are experiencing. And also talking to many younger people who are deciding whether they want to become a parent or not, and what are the challenges. And with all these challenges, can they even try to have a child? And then if they do try to have a child, do they have 1? Do they have 2? How do they manage? How do they manage career? So with all of this, we thought that while we run a fertility chain, and of course we see a lot of our patients go through the same journey, it's also important to have a conversation on, is it right for you? And is it right for what you want to do in life? And there's no right or wrong answer. And it's not a marketing ploy to say, come to Milann, but it's more of a conversation. And it's a very real conversation. When we see, on one hand, we see the Indian government waking up and saying fertility rates are coming down. What do we do? How do we convince? We also see global expectations of what's happening in China, where it is plummeted. And a lot of it has to do with what young people felt during COVID, and how they felt that there was a lot of separation and a lot of, insight into what they have to do. But India is in a unique position where we are the most populated in the world, and it is a choice. But for a lot of women, and the topic today is on motherhood, a lot of women, many feel that they have to give up something in order to get something else. But that's true of life. And so some of the things I'm going to say today, and I'm just opening up my notes on the side here, is I might say some things that are controversial. I might say some things that you don't agree with, and that's fine. And there is no right answer. There is a guidance, and there is someone who has gone through a journey, and I'm still learning along the way. But insights from colleagues, from friends, from family, always give a good path. But there are also some guidelines that I really follow through with. And I think that's what I really wanted to share today. One, I think first and foremost, as a woman, we always are worried about what other people think and what do we have to do for others. And, a conversation a long time ago with my dad was, Anjali, it's okay to be a little selfish. And that conversation about 10, 15 years ago was the right conversation to have, because I was so worried about what family wanted, what my career wanted, and what I wanted. And I always prioritized what I wanted at the end. And I feel that that is what resonates with a lot of women. But it's okay. And it is absolutely fine to set up limitations, guidelines of what you will and will not compromise on. And life is a little bit of a compromise. We have to compromise with our partners, with our family, with our siblings, with everybody. But there should be a Lakshman Rekha, what you won't cross. So, some of those things are true for me as well. So and I will walk through it. So I just first wanted to talk about some of the pain points I hear from others and some of the things that I have faced. And I'll kind of just bullet point those. I think first is, a question that a lot of women and want to be mothers or don't want to be mothers, don't know yet, are wondering, what support system do I have? Right? How much time can I actually spend with the child if I have a child? If I take a career break, am I going to be able to come back? And is it going to take me back a few steps? What are their finances? And in cities like Bangalore, how are those finances and how am I going to be able to provide education and other things? Will I be a good mom? Will I be a good employee? Will I be a good, any of those things? But often what I don't hear is, will I be a good Anjali? Will I be a good Puja? Will I be a good Parthi? Will I be a good, whatever my name is? And that is one of the things that we have to do is spend time and reflect on what we want to be. For me, it was, I wanted to have a career and I wanted to work. And I also wanted to have kids and spend time with them. So I actually started planning like 7-8 years before I started having kids on how am I going to balance and how am I going to do things. And I learned that, I'm an efficient person. I can plan and organize and drive everybody around me insane, but I do a lot of planning in my head and I organize my day. And I realize that I can be as efficient with my 5 hours as maybe someone else can be in their 8 hours. And I started focusing on fine tuning that. I also realized that while I have 10 things a day that I want to get done, if I get 7 or 8 of them, I'm okay with it. I'm not okay with just 3 or 4 things, but I'm okay if it's 7 or 8 things. And I don't know why that's coming. And I also realized as I talked to some people, for example, many years ago, I met the head of GE for healthcare, and her name was Terry, and she had, I think, 3 or 4 kids, and she had lived in the US. She said, when I was having my kids when I was young, I took, a less stressful job. But as my kids grew older, I, worked hard, and then she became the head. And we see that that's so often true. And there's nothing wrong with it because none of us wouldn't be here. None of us, man, woman, dancing bear, if we didn't have a mother. The mother had to spend the time and effort to, carry a baby, give birth to a baby, nourish the baby. This is the rule, and it's biology. We are mammals, and there's nothing wrong with it. And the society that says that, you have to give up, you have to do this, is a society that is more masculine in nature. And we know, statistically, we know that both genders have to exist, whether it is in nature, whether it's in careers. We know, for example, that companies that have a top management and a board with more gender diversity tend to do better in their revenues and EBITDA, which is ultimately what capitalistic worlds want. But we also know that, for example, in healthcare, 51% of our ground level staff are also women, and that they end up, coming in naturally to healthcare as a career because of, how they want to nurture. So there are many, there is no right and wrong in that aspect. I know a lot of people ask, what about in-laws and support? And I have, I guess, 2 sides of the coin there that says it's lovely if you have the support of in-laws. It's lovely, or of your parents. But there are many that do it. And, surprisingly, in India, we are very fortunate that we have more of a support system. But my cousins or friends that, live in the US and others they have to clean, cook, raise the kids, work all the time. And yet they still have time to have a weekend, still have time to go shopping, still have time to spend time in nature, and still have a little, some alone time as well. So just to give a little, I come home from work, I need my 20 minutes of alone time where I just go to my room, change, unwind, and transition from work to mom. But I have balanced it. I have given up certain things in work where I say, look, I'm not going to take up these roles because I want to spend time with the kids. I also have, colleagues that will call and say, hey, you didn't join the call at 7 p.m. And I say 7 p.m. is a no. I can do it at 8, but I can't from 6 to 8. I can't join because I have to put my daughter to bed. And it is you that has to determine the guardrails for yourself. It won't be anyone else. And it's okay to communicate and advocate for those things. So those are some of the things. And I think when it comes to employees and work, as someone who also hires, I think it's amazing in India that you get 6 months maternity leave. It's absolutely phenomenal. And, and I remember I took 5 months because, as I've said earlier, I like to work. But I remember when I came back to work, one of our HR said, oh, someone else asked for an extra month off. And I said, look at our director. She's coming back to work. And I said, excuse me, please stop saying that because my definition is very different than her definition. If she actually needs an extra month off, please give it because she might not have the support system that I have. She might not have, the necessary, finances or anything to hire. So if she needs an extra month, fine. We have a colleague that came and said, look, I want to come to work, but can I work from home a couple days a week? It was okay, do that for an extra 6 months. There is always a company that will understand. There is always a company that wants to make sure that you have that understand parenthood, that understand motherhood. And that's the type of company you should look for or try to create around you, but advocate for yourself. And, when it comes to health and balance and how do we plan, the plan, it does require planning. It does require, finding that partner once you have the partner, getting married or not, having a free, if you feel that, why do some people freeze? Some people freeze like me because we had a genetic thing. So others might freeze for other things, but to prepare, to be planning, you might not choose to do it. But a planning is, I feel, a good thing. But again, it's up to each individual person. And I think those are some of the things. I'll just go to the other thing I was going to say. Sorry, just a second. One of the things that some of the feedbacks from people that have been around is, I'll read a quote. I feel like women are always asked when they're having a baby, but not if they actually want one. And that's very true. There are people that don't want to have and want to focus on career. It's perfectly fine. We already have 8 billion people in the world. It's perfectly fine. If you personally want to have a child, then have a child. For me, it was very clear that I definitely wanted to have a child. I had a great childhood. I imagined myself being silly, having dance parties and tea parties and, going out for hikes with kids and enjoy seeing that curiosity. What I don't enjoy is people always saying, oh, are they going to school? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? And that is a big question that I think we face a lot here is what society thinks. What do others think? It's not worth it. I'll tell you, it's really not worth it. If the core people in your life, you can care a little bit about what they say, but it's not worth caring about what everybody else does. I think every week I get about 4 questions. Oh, you don't put your kids in school. I'm like, I put them 2 days a week for 2 hours because yes, they can socialize. I want my kids to be outdoors. I want them to be playing. I want them to go to Cubbon Park, or I want them to, play in dirt, play in water. I don't want them to be sitting in a box, but that was my choice. I also very strongly believe in language. My husband and I did a lot of research. So we said, okay, one person, one language. My kids know Kannada, they know Spanish, they know English, because it was be a deliberate parent. If you're going to go to the path of parenthood, I think it also requires work. It's not just, okay, I decided to be a parent. And yes, I have to get up in the middle of the night. I have to do the feedings. I have to do, potty train them. I have to do this. Yes, those are givens. but it is a joy to do them because you also see silliness, you also see curiosity, you also have fun. But also being a parent requires discipline. It requires you to know what type of parent. It requires you to do some amount of research and requires you to have some, again, the same like you would have in your work or you would have with your family, with your kids, also guardrails to say, where will you not cross the line? For me, I mean, there are three things, and this is where I do say that there is some rules, like screen time is a no. I feel if you go through 9 months of pregnancy and have a kid, then showing the phone to the kid is not a good thing. We know health-wise that kids that are shown the screen have more chances of having ADHD, hypertension, and diabetes. Why? Because they don't have a good association, especially when they're eating. They don't have a good association with food. So it does, being a parent is not just giving a birth, being a mom, not just giving birth, but being active to say, hey, and I hear often, oh, the in-laws or the parents just give them the phone. They say in Kannada, Oli bidu. Oli bidu is not okay for certain things that are non-negotiable because at the end, we are the parent. And so it, and you can hear mine crying. So, that's, and then the other thing I would say that's a must, unless, of course, medically not possible, or if you're taking medication, is once you have a child to take the effort to do the breastfeeding, because clinically, your chances of breast cancer decline. Clinically, your child's immunity improves exponentially. I know because I have an adopted child and a biological child. The biological one doesn't get sick because I somehow, even though I was working and doing everything, it was probably the most difficult thing was feeding her for 18 months. And my son, of course, was not able to get breastfed, and he gets sick much more consistently than she does. So we know, and I asked multiple colleagues, everyone, and friends who have had 2 children, and most of them got to feed one child more than the other because of career and because of other things. And they say the same thing. They say that the one that was fed just doesn't get as sick as much. So these are some insights that I feel are very important. Before we move into some of the questions, I had a couple more comments and things that I thought is, there's a beauty in motherhood. There's also a beauty in being an individual. We know statistically, if you're single, you're going to live longer than if you're married for women. Men live longer in a marriage for being male because they're in a marriage. Women live longer if they're single. But the quality of living, the quality and quantity also matter. So that's true. We also know statistically that I think around 4 or 5 years or something is about as much longer you live when you have a daughter. This is what I tell my dad. I'm like, you have 3, so you're going to live like 15 years longer than you would have. So there are, statistics matter, research matters once you decide. But ultimately, I also have amazing friends who don't have kids and who do so much impact in the world, and who enjoy and have friends and have a rich life. It does, just because someone says, I decide not to have kids, doesn't mean that you can't have a rich and fulfilling life. It is up to the individual. And we live in a time that we can choose. And we can choose. But I think, some things that I can say, and I say it lightheartedly, but also with seriousness, many wonder, my mother-in-law might not like me. Well, I think some of the general consensus I've heard is your mother-in-law might be very, very sweet to you. And then once you have kids, it changes. Dynamics change, marriage changes. And that's another key aspect. I've met a lot of parents who suddenly think once you have kids, that is the only sole focus of your being. It's not. Without a partner, without a marriage, if you're in one and then you want to have a kid, it's equally important. You have to spend the time, and if you can get a family or someone to take care and go on a date, once or twice a month is very important because you get on the same page and you are in a partnership to have a child. And that is what we have today. We know that, for example, in Europe now, with maternity and paternity leave, we know that men are much more involved in parenthood, and that is ending up that children are becoming much smarter. It is a balance of both. We also know that women that are in careers that have children also have smarter children. But at the same time, it doesn't mean, and this is where the finances come in, it doesn't mean that you have to put them to the most expensive school. You don't. It is quality over quantity. 15 minutes a day, individual time with a child without any phone, without any distractions, and what they want to do is hugely impactful in their well-being and in their growth. Experiencing, like if you have a boy, statistics show that boys don't do as well in school, and really the Finland method, which is considered to be the best education in the world, don't believe that kids should learn any schooling until they're 7, and they have the most people in research R&D in the world and doing high level work. Why? Because we are mammals. We do need our nature. We do need to get our hands dirty. The other day I was talking to a teacher and she said, I have so many kids that have never touched a twig, that have never touched a leaf. So I have to bring them in to the classroom. This is where I think parents can take more of a role to say, how much can we involve them in nature? How much can we involve them outdoors? Sports is not just to do a check mark, but it is. And that is very important. And that's where EQ, in emotional quotient, comes into play, the emotional intelligence. We see a world of AI, we see the world of tech, all this is growing. But in my opinion, honestly, the EQ level, the emotional intelligence, is going to be the most important thing in the future, in our children's future. So these are some of my thoughts and opinions. And I think one of the last things I'll say is, if and when you become a mother, remember you are also an individual, a partner, a daughter, a sibling, and a parent. And you have to give time for each of that. Individual is also in there, and it's the first one that I've said. Make sure you give time for yourself. Because if you don't give time for yourself, you're going to pull out your hair. And you won't be perfect. You will make mistakes. It's part of the journey. You will not be perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. And it reminds me of something someone said once to me, because I was kind of pulling out my hair one day, and my friend goes, someone I had met, she said, I wasn't a great parent for very young kids up till they were 3 or 4. And then I became a much better parent because I learned to listen, but also I was better at that age group. So maybe some mothers are very, very good, and some parents are very good at the younger age. Maybe some are very good at the older age. Maybe some are good at all of it, but it's not a competition. It's not a competition between me and the next person and the next person. It is, you are an individual. You won't do it the same as someone else. And no, none of us are alike. So it's okay. It's okay. It's absolutely okay. But what some of the things to consider, and again, I say it from people that I've talked to, is waiting too long. Yes, there are, and we have done it. We have had women in their early 50s that have had a kid, in their late 40s that have had a kid. That's fine. But there is some statistics behind that our biology and our fertility begins to decline in our early 30s. So it's something to just keep in the back of the head on when you're deciding. And when you're having that conversation and when you're reflecting on yourself. And let's see, I think I got all my points. I'd be happy to take any questions if people want to type them up. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time. Is it overwhelming for you to manage so many things at the same time? Of course. When isn't it? But it's also fun. It's also fun. You kind of feel like a jester. And you kind of feel like, okay, I dropped the ball here. It's okay. I'll make it up there. yes. I mean, I'm currently running or working in 10 companies and managing 2 kids and a cute dog. So there is definitely not a day where I get a 10, like an A+ in all of those fields. No, it's not. But it is about compromise, and it's about being okay with it. It's about being okay that you can't join a call. It's about being okay that you're a day late on something. But I always believe in communicating. I mean, communicate. If you need extra time for like a work thing and you're not able to do it because of your kids, communicate to your manager, communicate to the person and say, hey, I'm going to need an extra 2 days. And 90% of the time you get the extra 2 days because people understand, and people, I like to believe, have empathy in this area. So I had to, so I always also had some ideas for polls and questions, but I don't think, oh, here we go. What is your opinion on couples deciding not to have kids or having it later in life? I think it's your prerogative, and go ahead. Just keep in mind that if you're wanting to have biological freezing or understanding that you might have challenges. For example, with me, I wish I had known, even though I knew I was a carrier of DMD, I wish I had known what IVF was before starting, because had I known that I had to go through this, I would have frozen in my early 20s, and it would have saved me a lot of heartache, because ultimately it didn't really, I went through a lot of challenges and went through multiple miscarriages before I had my daughter. So it was, and in retrospect, I just wish that I had thought about it and planned, at least for better chances, because I mean, if and when someone has to go through a fertility treatment and are not able to do it naturally, or don't want to, go another means, it is, IVF is invasive. It does take time, and you have to also work on your stress levels and your health. Stress and fertility come hand in hand. So it comes back to the question of career. Do I work all the time? And then you will, whether you want to go for motherhood through natural means, through assisted means, you still have to take some time and de-stress and take time for your health. Our body is a machine, and it also needs breaks in order to heal, in order to procreate, in order to conceive, any of these things. So, but nothing wrong. In having kids later in life, I did. Someone told me that I don't look as old as I do today, but I had kids in my late 30s. So, how to manage stress while planning for a baby? Oh, great question. Yeah, so my very first time going through IVF, I was very, very stressed. And the doctors, I think, then had a chat with my husband, and we figured out a way to de-stress. So these were the techniques I used. One, read books that are fiction and that are not like horror. So I started reading some romantic, like comedy kind of books, or watching romantic comedy movies. But books is better because you have imagination. It kind of helps you de-stress. Second was listening to music in the evenings without phone or anything, just like putting it on a speaker and relaxing. Playing board games with my partner, feeling connected with my partner, but also just turning off, fine-tuning out the world. Going on long walks early in the morning. Doing some kind of health detox as well, massages. All of those really, really help, because as soon as your cortisol levels start coming down, your body is not in the fight or flight mode, and it feels that, okay, I'm more ready to conceive. So definitely managing stress, and then if you have stressful people around you or stressful things, actually taking yourself away from that. Many people say, they say that actually a lot of babies got conceived during COVID because there was a lot less stress and people were at home. But people also say that they, conceive more when they're on vacation, because they're having fun and they're more relaxed than in their work environment. So take the breaks that are needed, because it's very much needed for baby. There are there's a lot of reasons why conception doesn't happen, but one of the big indicators is stress, and stress in our body, not just in our minds. The mind stress and the body stress go hand in hand, but they're also, there's no medicine that can just solve the body stress, is what I believe. Any advice or suggestions for moms with no support? Oh, that is a very good question. And there's no right answer. I think, for example, I have a cousin of mine. She has 3 daughters. She, her husband's always working, and she has raised 3 wonderful daughters. But I think it's taken a toll on she had to not be able to work, and she was there and present. She has amazing children. She gardens. She does a lot of amazing things in her life, but it is difficult without support. My mother-in-law raised her kids pretty much by herself. My husband turned out great. And she was a single mom, having a baby by herself, even in the hospital. And she's done a phenomenal job, even though she had to work. She was grooming dogs at one point. She was working in a cafeteria. But she did an excellent job. So I don't think that being a mom with no support means that you're not going to be a good mom. In fact, I would say that you'd be a great mom. But it will be stressful and it will be challenging. Any other questions? How many years should we try naturally before going for IVF or IUI? Well, I'm not a clinician, so I would definitely say get an appointment with a doctor. But I do know that it depends on your age. There's a lot of indicators of between 2 months to 6 months to a year. It always depends on your age. But I would definitely suggest that the basics are get a fertility test done, know where your AMH levels are, know all that. So you actually have a kind of a report card of where you are. And so then you can kind of plan. What advice would you give to women who fear that motherhood may impact their professional career? Well, I would say it's okay. This is my quote is, I will work till I'm 95. So it's okay to, I want to spend time with my kids, and my kids will only be small for a few years. And after that, once they go into school, once they go into that, they have their own things, and I can have my career, and it's fun. I have to stress this enough. I think for me, the reason that I really wanted to be a mom is it's fun. I enjoy their curiosity. I enjoy how they tell stories, how, we have goofball parties, how they help me cook at 3, they're sitting and helping me mix eggs in the morning, or how they're setting the table. It's amazing to see that every day is wonder and it's a joy. So that's what I think that, that trumps my professional growth sometimes, and it's fine. It's okay. It's not a competition. And in fact, when you're ready to come back to work, I think if focus on EQ, focus on, being organized, people always want to hire. So I don't worry about that too much. I also believe that there are companies out there that believe in balance and believe, one of the things, just to give a side note, that I tried many years ago, and maybe I should try again, is for nurses who have 4 or 5 years experience and then have kids. Of course, they want to be able to, they have to take their kids to doctor's appointment. They have to do laundry. They have to, cook. So, doing what they're doing in Europe, which is 12-hour shifts 3 times a week or 4 times a week. So you work 12 hours, and then when you're able to do 3 nights in a row and 1 daytime shift, you also have 3 days off. You also have 3 days off. So those are the models I believe that we need to do more of, so people can have profession and also have that, but also working part-time, or if you enjoy work. I'll say one more thing on this. I was reading somewhere that if you tell your kid every day, I have to go to work, they always feel that it's a competition and that you would rather spend time with them than be at work. But if you like to work, you communicate to your child that you like to work, and they understand. And so I tried it out. Because I also was like, I have to go to work. And now I say, well, Amma wants to go to work. And I like to do this, and they appreciate it. And they talk to others about what Amma does at work. And kids are much more understanding than we give them credit. So, and it's good that they see someone that likes to go to work. Okay. Do you miss your older carefree days? So I am very spoiled. I got to have a lot of carefree days. I got to travel around the world by myself, backpack across Europe and South America. I did a lot of things, but no, I don't miss them at all. And I actually still have parties. I still let people come over. I still go out and socialize. We have a system, and again, based on data, we put our kids to bed between 7:30 and 8:15 to 8:30. So from 8:30 at night till 10, we have our time. We go sometime, now they're old enough that we can just leave them at home with someone and go out for a walk or go out for a drink and come back. So I don't miss my old carefree days. I also don't feel like I have had to compromise too much. I feel that I have put in a system to ensure that I also go out. And I do ask, and my family also insists, every so often they're like, we will take care and you and your husband go out. And I think it's very, very important. I mean, my parents have been married 44 years and they still go on a date every week. And they had 4 kids. And my grandparents also did that. So it's something that I think I've learned from my ancestors, of making sure that you have time to be with your partner and spend time with them. Thank you.